In A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Amari stars in this murder mystery show, which is about her character Pip, who tries to solve a 5-year-old cold case in her small town. So, to elaborate further and kind of summarize the first season, it has been 5 years in this little town called Little Kilton? Yeah. That was rocked by a scandal in which it was an assumed murder-suicide, in which the murder was of Andy Bell, and the suicide was of Salil Sal Singh, who was her boyfriend at the time. But to make matters worse, on top of Sal allegedly killing Andy, when he committed suicide and left a note, he didn't note where Andy's body was. So for 5 years, her parents and sister have not been able to have full-on closure. But again, 5 years later, after the case happened, Pip, who's a junior who grew up around Andy and Sal, she finds herself deciding to personally investigate the case that no one else has been able to solve, and with the help of Sal's little brother Ravi, this leads to her rattling a lot of closets and a bunch of skeletons being disturbed. So getting to the review portion, the first highlight is Pip and Ravi, and it's because when it comes to these two, I should note, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by no means is a romance, but even with that said, there's chemistry between Ravi and Pip that becomes kind of a special highlight of the season. For it's mostly in glances, banter, a bit of teasing as they investigate, saying one person is Sherlock, the other person's Watson. It's all low-key cute, and the type of stuff where it's like you don't know if it's just going to be friends and this is just their back and forth, or it's going to develop into something romantic or not. But either way, it's something that, considering that Ravi's life has kind of been in this form of arrested development since his brother died, and Pip has seemingly never had a boyfriend or like a legitimate crush, at least in a very long time either, seeing these two awkward ducks kind of get close to each other does create a very special set of moments. But I should note before we move on, this whole chemistry thing between them, it doesn't get in the way of the mystery. It's just, add a little sprinkle. But talking more about the mystery itself and the ultimate result, but not getting into spoilers, what I appreciate is that even though this case has been cold for about 5 years, it happened in a small town, and because of that, there's so many people who could possibly be involved. Like, who could have kidnapped or maybe were accessory to what happened? Did Naomi look at Sal almost a lovingly way in pictures, and maybe she did something to Andy because she was jealous, or maybe Sal because she got rejected? It's hard to say. And as we learn who Andy is, did she maybe fake her death? What about Sal? We're told that he killed himself, but is that true or not? Because the way that the police are depicted, and considering who Pip is and all the information she learns, you kind of don't really trust them, and you think they're not really competent, because if this 16, 17-year-old girl can gather all this information with ease, why couldn't these adults do it? Is it just because they're adults so nobody was talking to them? It's really hard to say. And then if you go by what Robbie says, he adds on this layer that yes, his family might be in some ways welcomed in the area, but there's still underlying prejudice. And one of the examples he uses is that when it came to Andy and Sal's relationship, a lot of people apparently weren't happy with the Indian guy with this local white girl. So it's in the beginning and middle kind of hard to say who did what or when. But as time goes on, you're slowly but surely given the hook. You're slowly but surely given the reveal of who did what, and it's satisfying, and I would say the ending potentially sets up a second season, but the way the second season sounds, if it follows the path it's on, doesn't necessarily sound like what the books it doesn't sound like what's going to happen in the next book. So, getting to low points is only one, and that's just Pip's friend group. Now, when it comes to Kara, who's Naomi's little sister, she's cool. She gets enough development that you see what her value is to this show. But as for Pip's other friends, one who wants to go to film school and then the two boys, I struggle to remember anything notable about them. I can't remember their freaking names. And I feel like there's someone between filler or characters they couldn't eliminate because potential fan backlash. So it's somewhere between those two, but I can only hope that when it comes to future seasons, we'll get some idea of why these characters weren't cut. And if you go by what's in the books, potentially these characters were just introduced for now so that later on, when they adapt the next book, their presence will actually make sense. Which leads it on the fence topic, and that is, while the mystery is good, there's gonna be so many times when you're gonna question how in the world did Pip solve this mystery? Because, again, let's take note. The murder of Andy, the suicide of Sal, took place 5 years ago. That means it's 5 years for whoever did all this to move the bodies around, for the bodies to rot, all the evidence to be taken away by rain, storms, whatever. And then that's not only enough time for the bodies and the evidence to go away, but also people to get their story straight. So the fact that Pip is coming across all this information and able to get it, it's a little bit confusing, and it kind of makes you wonder, does this follow logic? But that's not the only issue here. What's also kind of the wild part of this whole thing is how no real harm comes to Pip. And mind you, she's dealing with people and talking with people after trespassing, tricking some of them, and some of the people she speaks with have assaulted others, trapped them, drugged them, or into all kinds of debauchery, yet this innocent-looking girl is able to interact with them and no harm directly comes to her. And I would even add in, it's kind of weird that these people are even talking to Pip. And granted, Pip and Little Kilton is a small town. Pip and Little Kilton. Pip is in a small town called Little Kilton, so everybody probably knows each other, but even with that in mind, her connection to Sal and Andy was so small that her asking questions to kind of investigate or whatever, the fact that anyone takes her seriously kind of blows my mind. And then when you think about all the bad feelings and the issue of, Andy's body never being found, you're drumming up all these issues, and yet they're still talking to this child. At times, none of it's going to make sense, but if you're willing to just go on for the ride, you'll let go of all the stuff that kind of raises an eyebrow a little bit. And overall, when it comes to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, it may lead you to question how some people can be so stupid, if not naive. But because of how Maya is entertained throughout, you can only assume that they were as charmed by Pip as you were by watching this.